Greetings. I'm John Danner, co-host of this series on the resilient entrepreneur, building success and surviving setbacks, with my colleague Mark Coopersmith and our host, the Nick. In this installment, I want to focus on the fourth stage of the failure value cycle, because this is the one that you really can't avoid. Sooner or later, and probably unfortunately it is sooner than later, you are likely to find yourself dealing with a failure of some consequence. Probably unexpected, certainly not the way you wanted to start your day or maybe even end your day, but it is going to happen. And the question is, what do you do about it in the moment, during the failure itself? And before I move to the suggestions that Mark and I have in our book in chapter 13 of The Other F Word, I just want to suggest one immediate response, which is to pause. Take a breath. Before you start acting, just relax a bit. There's a wonderful book called The Pause Principle, P-A-U-S-E, The Pause Principle. And it talks about the power of pausing every once in a while, particularly when you're dealing with something that might not be too terrific, which is usually like it is when you're dealing with failure. So your role here is to be kind of the team captain. You know, you've got to have that poise under pressure. You've got to be able to be that island of sanity and security and calm if you can. Try to resist the temptation to scapegoat, to point fingers immediately. Your job is not at this stage to diagnose who's responsible. Your job is to basically figure out what to do about the failure in the moment. So we'll suggest three ways that you might consider reacting to failure. The first is, don't try to solve everything at once. Deal with what's in front of you. Try to focus on the immediate manifestation of this failure that's occurring. You want to try to stabilize things. There'll be time later to reflect on what happened and why. And there's probably going to be more time to fix the other dimensions of what's gone wrong. But in this case, just try to focus on what's immediately in front of you and try to stabilize that first. Secondly, communication is really important when failure is happening. Communication with your employees, communication with your customers, your suppliers, perhaps your investors. Be straight with them. Be frank with them. Honesty will go a long way to buying their patience and their understanding of what you're trying to do to correct the situation. And speaking of correcting the situation, it often goes beyond simply acknowledging it. A very powerful technique, and one that is sometimes difficult, is to apologize. Sincerely, genuinely, openly, honestly apologize for what happened. It probably caused other people inconvenience, cost them time, maybe cost them money, but apology can go a long way to rebuilding the kind of goodwill and trust that you've spent so much time developing with your team, with your customers, and with your suppliers. So consider those three things. First, stabilize the situation with what's immediately in front of you. Secondly, make sure when you're communicating, you're doing it simply and effectively with the parties that have been affected. And third, where it's appropriate, apologize. Everybody knows what it's like to deal with mistakes. You're not the first organization to have had a failure. You're not the first entrepreneur to have caused or to have been responsible or affected by a failure. People understand that. Show them that you too understand it, you're sorry about it, and you'll prevent it from happening again. Those are three suggestions for you in terms of this stage of the failure value cycle. How you can turn failure from a regret to a strategic resource. See you in the next installment. So long.